Established in 1911 as Ideal Motor Car Company before merging with Stutz Auto Parts Company in 1913, based in Indianapolis, Indiana, they would go all in on automotive production after coming in 11th place in the Indianapolis 500, coining the slogan, "the car that made good in a day." Stutz used Wisconsin engines in the beginning. Fast forward to 1926, Stutz would introduce an all-new chassis called the Safety Stutz. Stutz was one of the first companies to make safety a priority. The new chassis featured four-wheel hydraulic brakes, a low center of gravity, and an all-new engine that was conjured up by Charles Gruder, who was brought in by Frederick Miscavige, along with other key players who included but not limited to Charles Crawford, William Wall, Paul Bastian. Gruder worked for other manufacturers. Miscavige was looking to breathe life into Stutz. Gruder would develop a straight 8 for Excelsior when he worked for them. He would show the design to Miscavige, and that is just what he wanted to power his new car. Single overhead cam, 242 camshaft, dual carbs, 16-port cross-flow cylinder head twin ignition. Peugeot used it in racing. It was a very sophisticated engine for the era. The engine from the outside looks very similar to what the Duesenberg brothers were doing. Straight inline 8, but they are completely different animals. Valves are overhead actuated by cam, without push rods, without rollers, and without rocker arms. Camshaft is driven by a mesh chain in the front of the engine, and it acts directly on the tappets for the overhead valves. Silent chain. It also operates the distributor, generator, oil pump, fan, and water pump, which is located at the back of the engine and is driven off of a shaft that comes out of the generator. This engine does not have any rubber belts. Crankshaft is balanced and is supported by 9 main bearings to add to the rigidity and stiffness to mitigate whipping. Crankshaft is made of 1045 steel, forged, heat-treated, and ground. Main bearings are white, faced with bronze backing. This engine family featured cross-flow cylinder head. That meant that the intake was on one side, driver's side, and the exhaust side was on the other side, passenger side. The exhaust manifold and intake manifold would evolve through the years of this engine. Cylinders and upper crankcase are cast as one single gray iron block, with the crankcase extending 2¼ inches below the center line of the crankshaft. Each main bearing is carried in a heavy lateral web or wall extending across the crankcase. Water jackets extend down almost the entire length of the cylinder bore. It's noted that it's best to take the pistons out of the bottom of the engines and the connecting rod assemblies because it won't come out of the top. Pistons are made of light alloy, 3 compression rings, and 1 oil control ring. Connecting rods are heat-treated forged aluminum alloy. These engines are lubricated through full pressure, which is supplied by a gear pump. Oil flows to all the main bearings, and then it would flow to the connecting rod bearings through holes drilled in the crankshaft. It's important to note that the crankshaft itself is not hollow. The only holes in the crankshaft are the oil passages for the rod bearings. From the rod bearings, oil was forced through drilled passages in the connecting rods to the piston pin bushings. This engine ran a rectifier, which helped keep the oil at its original purity and consistency, eliminating all foreign matter, both solid and liquid. There was also an oil strainer in the oil pan. Introduced in 1926, 287 cubic inch displacement. This one was called the AA Series Stutz Vertical 8, 4.7 liters. It was good for 92 horsepower at 3,200 RPM, 193 pound-feet, or 261 newton meters around 1,400 RPM, with a bore of 3 3/16 of an inch and a stroke of 4.5 inches. Compression was 4.8 to 1. Years this engine was used, 1926. Mary, did you know that these cars use worm drive? I thought that was very interesting to find. With a theoretical top speed of 75 miles per hour. In 1927, Stutz would come out with a new engine called and this is where things get a bit confusing. Stutz would increase displacement by increasing the bore size of the 287 to 3.25 inches, which brought overall displacement to 298.64 cubic inch displacement, BB series vertical 8, 4.8 liters. It was good for 95 horsepower at 3,200 RPM, 205 pound-feet or 277 newton meters at 1,800 RPM with a bore of 3.25 inches and a stroke of 4.5 inches. Compression was 5-to-1. Years this engine was used: 1927. Ignition was improved. Top speed stayed the same at about 75 miles per hour. The confusion sets in because late in 1927, Stutz would unveil an all-new engine called the Challenger. The Challenger featured an all-new cylinder head with larger ports, higher compression. Intake and exhaust manifolds were also redesigned, but to my understanding, the Challenger uses the BB engine block. It just has a better head. The better head improved breathing, which now produced horsepower figures between 100 to 110 around 3,600 RPM, 226 pound-feet or 306 newton meters around 1,600 RPM, with the bore and stroke sizes are the same. Compression is 5.5-to-1. Years, 1927, and that's where it becomes conflicting because there is a note here. It says Challenger would become the BB engine in 1928, but I've saw it reversed as well. 1929 Stutz was the Series M, which would use the same valve gear, head, block, crankcase as the Challenger. Cylinder bore would increase from 325 to 3 3/8 of an inch. Stroke was the same, bringing overall displacement to 322 cubic inch displacement. Inline overhead cam 8. 5.28 liters. It was good for anywhere between 110 to 115 horsepower at 3,200 RPM, 226 pound-feet or 306 newton meters at 1,600 RPM with a bore of 3 3/8 of an inch with a stroke of 4.5 inches. Compression could either be 5-to-1 or 5.5-to-1. Years this engine was used: 1929 through 1931. It could be found in the Series M, Series MA, and Series MB. Zenith duplex carburetor model 105D. These engines were painted black, and it was the first engine that Stutz would paint black. Features a single overhead camshaft. Also in 1929, Stutz would begin to offer a supercharger. It was a Roots type mounted in a very precarious place up in front of the engine, just under the radiator, designed by Robert Birchfield, though Gruder is often credited for it. A 115 horsepower engine equipped with this type of supercharger would increase power to 155 horsepower. Supercharged cars could do 125 miles per hour. In May of 1931, Stutz would make an all-new head, adding another overhead camshaft, dual valve, also known as DV-32. Featured 4 valves per cylinder, 2 intakes, 2 exhausts. 32 valves total. Each cam operated either intake or exhaust, were driven by link belt chains or the mesh looking chain, very thick looking chain in the front of the engine. The cylinder head was also reworked, getting a new combustion chamber. The chamber design was more triangular shaped in the cross section with single spark plug in the center of the apex, and valves slanted into inclined sides, getting rid of twin ignition altogether. It's important to note that Stutz offered only one engine at this point, 322 cubic inch displacement, but it could be had either SV or single valve, which was the 16 valve arrangement, 1 intake, 1 exhaust for each cylinder, going the whole way down the 8 cylinders, or they offered the DV-32. Both of them were on the 322 cubic inch displacement engine. The Series M, MA, MB would eventually evolve into the SV-16. The DV-32 was the dual valve arrangement on the 322 cubic inch displacement block. 322 cubic inch displacement, inline 8 DV-32, 5.28 liters. It was good for 113 horsepower in SV-16 form, which was essentially a carryover, the Series M, MA, MB carryover, just called SV-16. The DV-32 could make up to 156 horsepower, and this is where things get a bit confusing. I saw that power figure with and without a supercharger, so I'm not entirely sure if this is naturally aspirated or if this is supercharged. Estimated 273 pound-feet or 370 newton meters around 1600 RPM with a bore of 3 3/8 of an inch and a stroke of 4.5 inches. Years that both the SV-16 and DV-32 were offered, 1931 through 1934. It's claimed that the DV-32 could go 100 plus. It could go even faster if it had a supercharger. Absolutely gorgeous engine, and it's an absolute travesty that there was only 200 made. And it even sucks even worse to find out that there's only about 100 known to survive. Of the Stutz DV-32. Stutz is proof that you can have speed, class, and sophistication and still fail. Stutz was never a high-volume seller, with each passing year selling less and less cars. And you also have to remember, during this time, the Great Depression was definitely a thing. Nobody had money to eat, let alone buy expensive luxury cars. Plus, the people that had money, most didn't have the crass to drive this type of vehicle through the streets in front of bread lines. Production would cease in 1935. Stutz built between 35,000 and 39,000 cars during their existence. After production ceased, Stutz would start to get into stock manipulation so that they could go back to building cars again, kind of like what they did in the 20s, but they didn't see the excesses that occurred like in the 20s. Stutz would file for bankruptcy in April of 1937, even though its assets exceeded its liabilities. There was a plan to revive when the market got better around 1939, but bankruptcy court forced liquidation. Stutz made some killer cars that are getting lost to time. The 30s closed cars have the best interiors of any American car from the 30s, in my opinion. They're very similar to what Cadillac was doing, especially the seats. If you're ever out and you see a Stutz in the wild, be sure to ask the owner if they'll let you feel the interior, because it is something truly special. Anyway, now it's time for Would You Rather. 2 scenarios today. These aren't fair, but which one would you rather have? 1930 Stutz MB or 1932 Stutz DV-32 or 1929 Stutz AA? I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. On to the second scenario, 1927 Stutz AA or 1934 Stutz SV-16 or 1928 Stutz BB. Once again, going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. Now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to get both the name of the band and the song title correctly in the comment section will have their comment pinned to the top of it. Huge shout out to the AACA library out in Hershey, Pennsylvania for making this possible. If you hit a roadblock looking for information, maybe you're doing a project car, maybe you're just trying to find out information about a specific engine or car, they have it there at the AACA library. Link is in the description if you want to check it out. Thank you all so much for watching this one. Until next time, toodaloo!